Ben, 30 years old, was left alone with a 3-year-old son in his arms. A car accident is a terrible thing, but when it takes away your beloved wife, it's as if you're dead too. Yet the child must live. He must be raised somehow. Ben aged overnight. Before, he regularly went to the gym, but now he had no spare time at all. Mornings were for taking Tommy to kindergarten, then rushing to work to hustle for more money, and evenings were spent picking up the child and doing routine household chores. "Ben, let's get you married," his older sister once blurted out. She often visited her brother, trying to help in any way. "I have a girl in mind, such a cool one." "If you say that again, we'll have a fight," he mumbled in response. His sister's words made him shudder. He couldn't imagine a woman appearing in his apartment to replace his dead wife. All right, the sister said. "I'll shut up. But at least find a suitable nanny for Tommy. You can't shut yourself in. You're still young. At least let her come for a couple of hours on weekends. Then you can go to the gym." "I would try," Ben nodded glumly. "But where do you find these nannies?" "I'll find one," his sister rejoiced. "I have a friend, also a single mum, who uses a babysitter who seems to have a small dog. My friend says her daughter is absolutely thrilled." "A little dog?" Ben didn't get it. "Is that allowed?" "Of course, with your consent. It's good for kids to play with dogs." "But what if Tommy is allergic to dogs? They say it can happen." "Well, if anything, you won't call her again. Shall I get the phone number from my friend?" "Go ahead." Ben grudgingly agreed. The next Saturday at exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon, his doorbell rang. When he opened the door, he saw a pretty woman, whom he immediately dubbed the lady with the dog. She wore a hat and had a pug dog in her arms. But the main thing was that both the woman and the pug, upon seeing Ben, seemed to smile the same smile. He was touched and smiled back. "How old is your child?" the woman asked instead of greeting. "What?" Ben didn't understand. "When we talked on the phone, you didn't mention his age." "Ah, he's 3, almost 4. "Good." The woman put the doggy down on the floor. "Daisy, run to meet him." Daisy, waddling funny on her legs, leisurely trotted off to explore the new apartment. "Oh, Daisy doesn't bite?" Ben worried, but from his son's room came an excited squeal of delight. As agreed, at exactly 9 o'clock in the evening, Ben returned. Opening the apartment with his key, he was struck by the silence. He tiptoed into his son's room, and in the faint light he saw a strange sight. Tommy was asleep, with the doggy curled up at his feet. "Oh, you've already come," came a whisper from behind. Ben turned around. "As promised, here," he whispered, holding out bills to the woman. "Thank you. Why is Tommy asleep? He never falls asleep before 10. "Because we had so much fun," the woman said tiredly. "With your permission." She went to the child's bed, took Daisy in her arms and carried her into the hallway. "Let me call a cab," Ben suggested. "No need. I haven't taken Daisy for a walk before bed." "I insist," Ben said firmly. "The weather's bad. You'll get to your house, and you can walk there as much as you want." The woman gave in and gave him the address. He called the operator and, hearing the fare, paid the woman extra. "Thank you," the nanny nodded. "I'll wait for the car outside." When she left, Ben remembered that he had forgotten to greet her properly. He went into the bathroom and found, to his surprise, that she had washed the children's clothes and hung them on the dryer. A whole pile of stuff. "That's the last thing we need. This wasn't the deal," he thought with annoyance. But when he entered the kitchen, he was even more irritated. On the stove was a pot with a note that read, "Breakfast for Tommy." His sister's suggestion about getting him married immediately popped into his mind, and he decided he would never call that nanny again. The next morning began with Tommy jumping into bed with him. "Daddy, when is Lisa coming?" the son shouted cheerfully.
"What Lisa?" Ben grumbled unhappily. "Tommy, let me sleep."
"But Lisa is the nanny who came yesterday."
Sleep instantly vanished. "She won't come again," he told his son firmly.
"Never?"
Horror appeared in Tommy's eyes. Ben was alarmed.
"And Daisy? She won't come either?"
"No," Ben answered quietly, then came to his senses and hugged his son. "Do you want me to buy you a dog today? A little dog?" For some reason, Tommy broke free from his father's embrace and went to his room. They ate breakfast in silence. The son stared blankly into the void. "Well, what about you?" Ben asked affectionately. "What do you want?" "This Daisy? We lived without her and will live without her yet. Who's dearer to you, me or the doggy?"
"You?"
the son answered in a quiet voice, got up and went to his room. Ben had lost his appetite. He quietly walked to his son's closed room and listened. From inside came the sound of quiet sobbing. Ben returned to the kitchen, thought for a moment, then took his cell phone and dialed the nanny's number. The dial tone went unanswered for a long time, then a quiet voice sounded. "I'm listening." "This is Tommy's father, from yesterday," Ben began, but suddenly a drunken male voice broke into the conversation. "Who's calling you?" Ben heard a string of swear words. "What's going on?" he asked worriedly. "Who is that?" "Nothing," the woman replied tersely. "My ex-husband showed up. He won't calm down. Excuse me, I'll call you back." The drunken voice shouted something. Then came hysterical dog barking and a woman's shriek. The connection cut off. Ben's heart began to race. Something terrible was clearly happening at the nanny's home. The address where he'd called a cab for her yesterday popped into his mind. He didn't know the apartment number, but he had to do something. Shouting to his son, "I'll be back soon," Ben rushed out. Within a minute he was starting his car, and 15 minutes later he arrived at the right building. "Excuse me," he hurriedly addressed the first elderly woman he saw in the yard. "A lady with a dog lives in your building. She wears a hat. Can you tell me which apartment?" A couple of minutes later, Ben was on the 5th floor at the door, behind which a drunken man's voice still sounded. Ben pressed the doorbell and held it until the door opened, revealing a male figure.
"Who are you?"
the figure asked defiantly, then immediately fell from a well-placed punch. Ben, restraining his anger as best he could, waited patiently as the man got up from the hallway floor. "If you come here again, I'll throw you out the window. Now get out!" Ben pointed at the door. The ex-husband disappeared. Ben entered the gloomy room. The nanny sat in an armchair, whimpering quietly, almost like Tommy, clutching the dog to her. Ben's heart clenched. "Is it alive?" he asked. Meeting her confused look, he clarified, "I mean, is Daisy alive? I heard her yelping." "She's fine," Lisa nodded tiredly. Then she whispered, "How I hate him." "He won't come back, I promise you." "He will," she said hopelessly. "You don't know him." "And you don't know me." He smiled, walked over to her, took the trembling Daisy, and stroked her awkwardly. "How soft she is. No wonder Tommy is crazy about her. Let's go, Lisa." "What?" She didn't understand. "Where? Who?" "Where else? To our place. He's waiting for you and Daisy. Very much." "Are you kidding?" She looked at him intently. "No, I'm not joking," Ben answered, looking at her straight in the eye. He didn't understand what was happening to him, but he knew one thing for sure. Everything he was doing was right. "You can't stay here. Besides, the breakfast you prepared yesterday,
He refuses to eat without you."
Ben, with Daisy in his arms, turned and went to the door.
"Catch up with me, Lisa. I'll wait for you by the car."
"OK," she nodded, not getting up from her seat. "I'll just gather my thoughts and catch up."